Okay. So, hello everybody. This is Marwan Bob, Boston Realty Institute, and we're having a casual, very, very casual conversation about real estate. And this is just a little series that I'm going to be doing for the next 20 days or so, where I'm going to spend anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour to talk about real estate and how to pass the real estate exam, some of the things that someone can expect, so that if they want to use this guide to study, they can subscribe to the channel, watch the videos at their own leisure, and maybe it's going to help someone study and make sure that they pass the real estate exam. This can be applied to many states, not just Massachusetts, but this particular course is Massachusetts specific. But the things that are in it apply to Massachusetts, and it also applies to other states. So because this is the first session, we're only going to spend about 30 minutes on this session. We're going to talk about maybe 2 or 3 concepts, and then we're going to go and talk about other stuff. Before I get started with the book, let me talk about the exam in Massachusetts. The exam in Massachusetts is 120 questions and 2-part exam. The first part is called the general exam. The second part is called the state exam. And there are about 120 questions, 80 questions for the general, 40 questions for the state. And you need to pass both of them, not combined individually, with 70% or higher to get your real estate exam. And you have 4 hours to do the exam. Calculators are allowed, but only the ones that are provided on the computer. All the other ones are not allowed. And it's proctored by PSI. And if you want to find out more information about their information, you can go Google PSI Massachusetts Real Estate Exam, and it's going to bring you to their web landing page and website and all of the information that they provide. The registration, I believe, is $50, and then the exam itself is about $30. So you end up spending about $80 for the course. Once you pass it, you pay a fee to the state, anywhere between $100 to $200 based on your birthday, and they'll issue you the license so that you can become a licensed agent. In Massachusetts, your license is not valid until you join an office. So you have to join an office first, then the license becomes valid, because the broker has to send a notice to the state informing them that you've joined his or her office. So the office that you join has to send a letter to the Division of Professional Licensure Real Estate Board for them to know that you have joined your new broker's office. If you want to become a broker in the near future, I advise that you get a copy of that letter, because the clock starts when that letter is sent. So make sure you have a copy of that letter. So let's talk about some real estate, okay? So
Sorry, I have a question. How long do you have, or what's the time limit until your license is expired, or what's the timeline for you to like join an office or a broker's office?
Okay, so there are 2 parts to that question. The first one is, once you take the class, you have 2 years before that course become invalid. So you have to take the exam within 2 years of taking the course. Once you take the exam and you pass the exam, you have the expiration of the license that tells you how long you have before you join an office. So the license in Massachusetts is valid for 3 birthdays. So if you get your license today and your birthday is today, that license is good for 2 years. So you have 2 years to join an office. If you get the license today and your birthday was yesterday, that license is good for 2 years, 11 months, and however many days. So you have that time frame to join an office. So the time frame that you have to join an office is based on how much time you have before your license expires. But once you have the license, as long as it's not expired, you can join an office. In order to maintain the license, you have to have 12 hours of continuing education in the state of Massachusetts at an approved school. Awesome. So let's get to some real estate concept, and we're going to go for about, again, 30 minutes. So we've been on the call for 6 minutes. So we'll go about 24 minutes, and then we'll go from there. So the concept of real estate, all right, the concept of real estate. Concept of real estate is about property. Property, the property rights, and the property ownership is everything that is subject to ownership. The concept of property is everything that is subject to ownership, such as right of use, such as right of encumbrance, such as right of disposal. It excludes all other. The key word here is exclusivity. Something is said to be yours. Something is said, this is my property, when you and you alone have the right to something and no other person have rights to that thing. So if I have a bottle of water and I'm drinking it and I paid for it and it's mine, therefore, what makes it mine is that only I have the right to drink it. Only I have the right to sell it. Only I have the right to spill it, the right to use it to wash my hands with it, or the right to do whatever it is that I want with that bottle of water. If someone else makes an attempt to do something with that bottle of water without my knowledge and consent, that becomes an illegal act. That becomes the person is stealing, the person is vandalizing, the person is damaging, the person is encumbering with the rights that I have that no other person has. So the concept of property, it is irrelevant to what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. The concept of property is about what I have rights to and no other person has those rights. So property is about ownership rights that I have that no one else has. And that's what property is about. It could be tangible, it could be intangible, it could be physical, it could be non-physical, it could be intellectual, it could be emotional, it could be anything else. It could be something that you can touch, it could be something that you cannot touch. But the concept of property is that concept where I have rights to this, you do not have rights to it. If there is something that exists where everybody equally have rights to it, therefore it is not mine, but it becomes community property. All right. So property is about the idea that I have exclusivity. Only I can do this to this. Only I can have it. Only I can use it. Only I can benefit from it. And no other person can benefit from it. That is what makes it mine. That is what the concept of property is all about. Okay. And there are two categories of property. There's something called personal property, and the opposite of personal property, or the other side of the coin of personal property, is what's called real property. Real property is anything that is attached to the earth. So real property is earth and anything directly or indirectly attached to it. And that's why it's called real estate. Real estate is real property. Real property is the earth, all the minerals that are still in the earth, and everything outside of the earth that is directly or indirectly attached to the earth. It's important to understand that. It's important to remember that, because if you understand it, then you will know how to handle it. You will know how to contract it out. You will know how to protect it and how to even insure it. The concept of property is understanding the distinguished difference between real and personal. Now, personal property is anything that is not attached to the earth. Personal is anything that is not attached directly or indirectly to the earth. Let me give you guys an example. You can have a mobile home that you use to live in. If that mobile home is not attached physically to the earth, it is still considered a personal property, even though its use is the same as a real property. A home is made out of 2x4s. It's made out of structures, steel, rocks. It's made out of roof systems. But when those systems are not attached directly to the earth, those systems, those things are considered personal property. For instance, if I have a door behind me, that door is just leaning on the floor, it is considered a personal property. Once that door is attached to a building and that building is attached to the earth, that door becomes real property. And that's the distinguishing features or the distinguishing separation between the two. That is how you identify one versus the other. Personal property moves with the person. Real property stays with the land. So if we look at even a ship, a yacht, something, an aircraft carrier or a cruise liner, no matter how big it is, it's still considered a personal property because it moves and it is not attached to the earth. Something like a tiny home, once you have a foundation and the tiny home is attached to the property, the land, it becomes real property and not personal property. So remember that. That is an important idea that you have to remember. Why is that important? That idea is very, very important because as a licensed real estate agent, your job is to sell, your job is to convey, your job is to negotiate real property. And you do that with a contract called a purchase and sales contract. When you sell a house with personal property in it, you should not be responsible. You should not take on the responsibility of conveying the personal property that are in the home with the home itself, because you're exposing yourself to liabilities that is not part of your job description. So be careful. I've seen homes that are sold and it comes with a car. And as soon as a person buys the home and the car is transferred, the car breaks down. The buyer is upset and he files a lawsuit. You, the real estate agent who negotiated and put the contract together, is now dragged in because the car broke down. And this could happen to furniture, electronics, things that are not part of the real estate transaction. And now you are wrapped into this mess where you have to defend yourself for things that were not part of your responsibility or your duties. So as a real estate agent, as someone that is conveying real property, be careful to separate the two so that you focus on the things that you're getting compensated and you're being hired to do. That's the reason why it's important to understand it. The other reason why it's important to understand this is if you are hired to convey real property and something changes on the real property, you may be dragged into a nasty complaint, nasty lawsuit, or anything like that. For instance, I am selling my house. The house comes with a chandelier. The chandelier was hanging on the ceiling when the buyer walked through. If that chandelier was not in a disclosure form that exempts that chandelier from being sold with the property, if that chandelier becomes missing at the final walkthrough, at the inspection, or after the buyer has taken possession of the property, if that chandelier is missing, you, the licensed real estate agent, has to find a way to have the chandelier be reinstalled because it is part of the property. It is real property. It's not personal property. And when someone's buying real property, they're buying the real property the way it is shown, the way it comes, unless there's a disclosure form that exempts what it is that is being sold. So if you read a purchase and sales contract, it clearly says that the property that the person is buying, they're buying it with everything that comes with the property, everything that is directly or indirectly attached to property, any real property. So a lot of conflict happens when you deal with dishwashers, you deal with washer and dryers, you deal with refrigerators, things of that nature. Agents have to be intelligent enough, educated enough to distinguish the difference between what is real property and what is personal property. What is real property and what is personal property. So a fridge could be considered a personal property if the fridge is not physically attached directly or indirectly to the home. For example, if the fridge is not connected to an ice maker through a bolt. If it is, that bolt that ties the plumbing to the refrigerator makes that fridge a real property. Therefore, that fridge is required to stay. If you find homes that has bolt TV on the actual property, unbolting the TV from the property makes that transfer potentially illegal. It makes that transfer potentially confrontational. So you have to make sure you, as the real estate agent, you as the person that's conveying the transaction, that you explain to your clients that if a TV is bolted, make sure you have an exclusionary form if you intend to take the TV with you. Otherwise, if that TV is bolted to the wall, that TV is not considered real property and not personal property. And that's the reason why these simple little paragraphs are really important, because they could make a difference in the transaction and also impact your commission greatly. So 2 types of property, personal and real. Make sure you remember the difference between the two. So personal property, also known as personality, have 2 main characteristics. First one is movability and not attached. And there are 2 types of personal property. The first one is tangible or corporeal, which includes unattached physical items such as furniture or personal belongings and things of that nature. Once you can touch it, you can move it, those become tangible. Intangible, incorporeal means that it is not it's not physical, it's not something that you can touch, it's not something that you can move around, but it still moves with you as a person because it is not attached to the earth. These are trademarks, copyrights, intellectual properties, and things of that nature, ideas and things of that nature. Those are intangible, incorporeal trademarks or personal properties. Now, personal properties, if you understand it, is things that goes with a person because it moves or because it's not attached to the earth. Well, there are 2 exceptions where something could be attached to the earth, but it still moves with the person after the sale or even after the transaction has taken place. So suppose that a business rents a space and they're going to operate their activities in that space. They bring machines and equipment and install it in the space and bolt it on to the building. Because the used machine has a source of income, has a necessity for their day-to-day operation, when their lease expires, when they're moving out, when they sell that building, they have the right to disassemble those equipment and move it with them when they sell or move out of the space that they just rented. So those are called trade fixtures. So a trade fixture, even though it's attached, because it is used in the ordinary course of business, it may be detached and moved, and it will be considered personal property. That is the first exception. So if a butcher rents a space and bolts a butchering block onto the floor, that butcher's block can be moved when that butcher moves from space A to space B. The second exemption, the second exception to this rule are called emblements. Emblements are crops. Important here, very, very important. Emblements are crops, things that you plant annually or semi-annually. You need to plant it annually or semi-annually onto the property for it to be considered a personal property. We're not talking about perennials, things that bloom every season. I have cherry blossoms in my backyard, they bloom every season, it doesn't mean that I get to take my cherry blossoms with me. I have strawberries that are planted in the back. You plant it, the season goes, they're still the plant is still there afterwards. Does not mean that it dies off. But things that requires me to plant it seasonally. So for instance, I don't know, onions, corn, cabbage, things that where at the end of the season, they completely die and they don't come back by themselves the next season, that is an implement. Because I planted it and it's seasonal and typically it is used for commerce purposes, then the law typically allows me to take it with me to the next place. This is very important. We've had situations where a customer planted roses that were gifted to her by her deceased grandmother. When she sold the house, she was under the impression that she could unearth the roses and move it to her next home. The sellers were unwilling to let her do it, and she could not because they were not implements, because they were real property. So if you have situations like that, you need to make sure that you explain to your clients before they put it up, before they put the property on the market. If there's anything whatsoever that they intend to take with them, they need to make sure that they put it on a disclosure form or take it before putting the property on the market. And it also is valid if you're buying a home, make sure that you ask if there's a confusion of what stays with the property and what goes with the property, because the seller's agent or the seller will have a disclosure form that they have to disclose to you of what they intend to take, so that you make up your mind whether you want to buy the property with or without that item that is being excluded in the transaction. So the second exemption is implement, annual or semi-annual planting crops, which although it is rooted, are removed by the seller if the buyers agree. And this is allowed once. And the way that you test for these things is, number one, how is it attached? The method of attachment. Is it permanently affixed by nail, glue, bolts, or roots? If the answer is yes, that is considered real property. If something is attached to the earth directly or indirectly through nail, glue, bolts, or roots, it is considered a real property. If the answer is no, it is considered a personal property. Let's take a cell phone, for example. If I control my home through my cell phone, and I take my cell phone and I put glue on the back of it and I glue it to the wall, that cell phone is now a real property. It is no longer a personal property, it is real property. Adaptability is the second example. Is it custom fit? Is it custom built to fit a particular space? If the answer is yes, then that is a real property. If the answer is no, then it's a personal property. The idea behind this is that if someone cannot take what it is that was built and move it to the new location and have something that works identical, seamlessly, then the question is, was it built for that space or not? And then, of course, number three, whether something is built for that space, whether it's glued or not, the agreement of the parties can supersede the agreements, can supersede what the thing is or the intentions of it. So for instance, if I'm selling my property, but I want to take that plant in the front yard, I can say to the buyer, I'm going to sell you this property under the condition that you let me take my plant with me. If the customer refuses, then the customer simply does not buy the property. So the agreements of the party can trump all of these agreements, all of these rules that are in place. Now, the first rule of real estate, extremely important, is that everything must be in writing. Everything must be in writing. So if you're going to enter into an agreement like that, you must put that agreement in writing. And then The last one is intentions. When that thing was done, was the intention to make it real, or was the intentions to make it personal? If the intention was to make it real, then the agreements of the party or the intentions or the adaptability or the method of attachment can be argued through that lens. If someone did something that without having the intentions of making it permanent, then it's considered a personal property. So all of these things are extremely important. You have to remember that trade fixtures are an exception, implements are an exception. You have to remember the method in which something is attached can define what that thing is. If it's nailed, glued, bolts, or roots to the earth directly or indirectly. When I say indirectly, I mean that you take a cell phone, you glue it onto the 2x4 in your home. That 2x4 is connected to the foundation. That foundation is connected to the earth. That cell phone now becomes part of the property. So directly or indirectly. And then, of course, adaptability, agreements of the party, the intent is important. And you have to remember that a personal property is conveyed, is transferred from one party to the other using a document called a bill of sale. If it's a real property, this is land, house, this is that tiny home that's now connected to the earth. This is that trailer park that doesn't have the wheel, is connected to the earth. If it's a real property, it is conveyed from one party to the other. It is transferred from one party to the other. It is sold from one party to the other using a document called a purchase and sales contract. These are two separate, different documents based on what type of asset, based on what type of thing you're conveying. So if you're conveying personal, you use a bill of sale. If you're conveying real, you use a purchase and sales contract. A personal property is also considered a chattel. Remember that a statute of fraud requires that all agreements between parties in real estate must be in writing. Everything that you enter into a conversation with anyone about real estate, the statute of fraud requires it to be in writing, to be enforced in a court of law. If it's not in writing, it may not be enforced in a court of law. Therefore, it becomes pointless and it's just wasted breath. So remember, put everything in real estate in writing. All right. So let's do 2 minutes of Q&A and then we'll get out of here. Any questions? You can ask your questions if you have any.
No, I'm good. I don't have any.
The only question that I have is if we're trying to sell a property and that property have a tree that the previous owner wanted to take out, is that a conflict in that manner, or how do you?
Did the person try to take the tree after he sold it or before he sold it?
Before.
So if I own a property and I want to sell it, but I want to take the tree before I sell it, that is not a conflict as long as it's not on the contract. If someone says, I want to buy it, and you say, yes, I agree to sell it, and you sign a piece of paper putting that house on the contract, you lose your right to take that tree off. It makes the buyer equitable owner. He owns the property through equity because he put a deposit. The deposit makes that buyer equitable owner of that property. You have legal ownership of the property, but you lose the potential future benefit that that property can bring because the person puts the house on the contract and put a deposit. So you cannot take the tree at that point. But if that is not the case, If you don't have a contract and you have property and there's a tree, you have the right to take down the tree as long as it doesn't affect your neighbors. There's also something called a I forgot the name of it. I have to think about it. But there's a situation where if someone has enjoyed something for a long period of time, you taking it down would impede their enjoyment. Therefore, they may restrict you at taking it down. But under normal circumstance, you're allowed to take the tree down.
So when you say that you impede them because they enjoyed it for so long, could that be like somebody that has nothing to do with the property? Could it be like a neighbor, for example? They're looking over a nice yard with nice cherry blossom trees, and then you decide to remove it before you actually put up the property for sale.
Yes. So what I mean by enjoying, typically it's because the tree provides shades or because the tree provide privacy or something along those lines where it would do some sort of harm to them. But usually that harm may not be just the view, or you have beautiful cherry blossom and I enjoy looking at it. I don't think it goes to that extent. But however, what it does is that if the tree that is there has provided shade to me for so many years, or it has provided privacy to me for so many years, there may be some obstacles in taking the tree down. Now, these are not legal advice because I'm not an attorney and every state might be different. But to answer the question is, if there's a tree in your property, you have the right to take it. There are certain jurisdictions where you have to pull a permit or ask the town or the city or the municipality if you can take certain number of trees down because they want to have, for environmental purposes or safety, health, and welfare, they want to control the number of trees within that community, and you have to check with the town. But under normal circumstance, you typically are allowed to take down trees on your property if you want to, but do it safely. Any other questions before we get going? Awesome. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last 30 minutes, and I hope you enjoyed this. And I look forward to doing more of these. If you have any questions, drop the questions on the comments below, and someone will get back to you, or I will answer them when I have the time. Thank you. Make sure you